Not all HOAs are created the same. Not all of them are created equal, and not all of them are run well. And if you're just looking for the best price on the house or the best price on the condo, then you're probably getting yourself into a really bad situation. We're here to help you with that. And if you like that or that resonates with you, like and subscribe to this channel because that's what we're all about. If you're thinking of buying a house or a condo right now, it's most likely, or there's a high possibility that you're looking at houses or condos that exist in an HOA. And it's really easy to say, I don't want to live in an HOA, I'm not going to move to an HOA, never buy in an HOA. Sure, that's easy. However, more and more, your options are becoming limited. They're saying 84% of new construction currently is in an HOA. And over the last 20 years, probably that number's been 65 to 70%. So if you're looking at a newer place, the chances that you're looking at buying in an HOA are pretty high. So what are some things you need to know? Not all HOAs are created the same. Not all of them are created equal, and not all of them are run well. And if you're just looking for the best price on the house or the best price on the condo, then you're probably getting yourself into a really bad situation. Same if you're looking for just what has the lowest HOA dues. Again, you're probably getting yourself into a really bad situation. Before I bought my first condo, there was a complex nearby that had the lowest HOA dues around. It was like $125 a month, and the cheapest I could find anywhere else was like $250 a month. And I kept trying to get into this condo, but I couldn't, they would get bought up like hotcakes. And they were relatively cheap units with super low dues. Now fast forward 5 years and I'm in HOA management, and I come to find out that complex that I really wanted to buy in, they just had a giant special assessment, and everybody in there is paying $650 a month now, or $700 a month, because they needed new roofs, new siding, new paving, all this new stuff, and nobody had the money for it because they were just charging as little in HOA dues as possible for as long as possible. And the result was the people who bought into that community got screwed in having to pay all this money in special assessments and HOA dues. So what are the things you want to look for before you buy a property that's located inside any kind of association? Well, the first thing and the biggest thing is the financials. There's three main things that you're going to want to look for. First, you're going to want to look at the budget. Legally, well, actually, not necessarily legally, but for any major lender to even write a mortgage on the property, they're gonna need to be putting at least 10% of their operating expenses into the reserves on an annual basis. So if they're not budgeting at least 10% for reserves, the bank probably won't even give you a loan for it, which is a huge red flag, but they're relatively rare. However, if they're only putting 10% of their budget into reserves, if you do the math and you look at their total annual income, and then you look at their reserve line and how much they've budgeted for reserves on an annual basis, and it's exactly or right around 10%, that's a red flag. Why is that a red flag? Because 10% is not nearly enough to cover the actual long-term capital reserves and replacements. The actual capital reserves and replacements can range anywhere from 20% to 70% of the annual income. I've seen associations where to really pay for the siding, the roofs, the decks, the windows, the sliders, the interior common areas, the elevators, the mailboxes, the pool, and all the other amenities that the condo association has, it's literally as much as the entire operating budget, which includes snow plowing, maintenance, electricity, heat, water, and all these other things that you pay on a monthly or annual basis, right? So you have your current expenses, and then you have your future expenses. Sometimes an adequate reserve study will say your current operating expenses are literally only half of what you need to pay because you have to replace so much as an association that you need to contribute another 100%. You need to contribute double of what your actual operating expenses are to be able to fund the long-term capital repairs and replacement. And now we're seeing where people didn't want to pay $400 a month for dues, they're having to pay $800 a month for dues. Why? Because the $400 a month only had 10% budgeted for long-term capital replacement when the real number should have been like 100%. The real number should have been, you need to double your operating expenses to be able to pay for your long-term capital responsibilities. And then a reserve study comes in, usually state mandated, and they come in and they say, listen, this is how much it's going to cost to replace all the stuff you need to replace. And then it's like, wow, our dues are doubling. We're getting a $200,000 special assessment, whatever it is. All right. So the first thing is the budget. Do they have a really good chunk of money set aside for capital replacement and reserves? Have they done a reserve study? That is the second thing you want to look at. If they haven't done a reserve study, red flags. If they haven't done a reserve study, they don't really know what their long-term capital exposures and responsibilities are going to be. They don't know what their replacement cost is, and therefore there's no way they're budgeting for it. All right, so now you find out that they've had a reserve study done. Well, look at the reserve study. Look at how much the reserve study, there's going to be a table, a breakdown of how much the association needs to contribute every year to reserves, and then the funding method of that reserve study. So is it a fully funded reserve study, or is it a threshold funded reserve study? And does the reserve study factor in special assessments? Because sometimes they do. Sometimes it's so astronomically expensive to replace the structures of the association that they say, we're going to double the dues, and there's still going to be a special assessment the year that you guys have to do this work, because we're only funding 80% of your reserves. It's a threshold, right? With a 20% special assessment at the time that the work's to be completed. So you want to look at whether, if they have the reserve study done, does their budget align with the reserve study, and what's the reserve methodology, the reserve funding methodology that they're planning for, right? Are they planning threshold? Are they planning full replacement costs? And what does that mean? When was the reserve study done? Have they updated it recently? Reserve studies at the most should be updated every 5 years, right? Sometimes sooner than that. Are they staying on that schedule? Are they using a reserve study that was done 15 years ago with prices from 15 years ago that didn't factor for inflation? Again, they don't have a reserve study in place, and their budget doesn't adequately represent good reserve savings, then you could be in big trouble. What does their reserve account look like? Is it $40,000? Is it $100,000? Is it $12,000? Sometimes you look at a complex that has 50 units and you're like, they have 70 grand in reserves, and you're like, that's great. And I look at it, I'm like, that's not even one roof. That's 10% of what a new roof should cost them. When are the roofs going to be due? Oh, the roofs are going to be due in 5 years. Great. They have 1/5 of the amount of money they have to replace one item, let alone all the other items that are going to come due. Their paving, their lighting, their common areas, right? So just seeing a big number in reserves does not mean they're adequately funded if you don't have a reserve study to reference. The amount of money they should have depends on how old the association is. If it's like brand new and they have 100,000 in reserves, they're probably in pretty good shape. If they're 50 years old, if they're 50 years old and there's some major items that are due for replacement and they have $100,000 in the bank, special assessments in the near future, right? So to find out how much they have in reserves, that should be on the resale certificate. It'll also ask for a balance sheet, and that'll show how much the association has in assets and liabilities. Do they have outstanding loans? Are there outstanding suits and judgments? So you're looking at a really cheap property. Well, it might be really cheap because they have a huge loan or a huge special assessment. It might be really cheap because their HOA dues are really, really high, or they have a pending litigation because someone's suing them for $5 million for a slip and fall. All of those things factor in. And if the property values are really cheap and the HOA dues are really cheap, that should be a red flag. If you see an HOA or a condo association and they have a solid amount of money in reserves, they have done a reserve study in the last 5 years, and their budget reflects a specific funding methodology and it aligns with the reserve study, and their HOA dues are significantly higher than the rest of the HOAs in that town or in that area, don't be scared because the house is more expensive or the HOA dues are higher. High HOA dues may mean that they just have a responsible board and a good management company. It could mean that they're adequately saving for the stuff that they need to pay for, and therefore you're not going to have surprises later on. But when you buy A cheap house with low HOA dues, you're gonna have big surprises, and they're not gonna be good surprises. It's really important that you look at that before you buy into that association. So that's two things. One, look at the budget, look at the reserve funding. Two, check to see if they have a reserve study. Three, look at their P&L, their profit and loss statement. Look at the types of things they're paying for. Does it seem reasonable? Does it seem necessary? Are they spending their money wisely, right? But that comes, it's in that order. 1, budget. 2, reserve study. 3, P&L. And then 4, the last thing you're gonna look at is actually read the declaration and read their rules and regulations. This is gonna tell you a lot about the culture of the community. The declaration is also gonna tell you who's responsible for what. So if you have low HOA dues, and in the declaration it says, well, unit owners are responsible for their own windows, their own sliders, their own decks, their own paving, maybe that's okay, right? Maybe they wrote the declaration, or as many people like to say, the bylaws, right? They wrote the condo docs in such a way where unit owners pay for more so that the HOA dues can be lower and the HOA has to carry less money in reserves. However, if the declaration says that the HOA is paying for everything and you look at the reserves and the reserves don't have enough money for the HOA to pay for everything, then that's a red flag. Also look to see, what are their rules like? Do they seem reasonable? Does it seem like a really uptight community? Does it seem like a really lax community? And then how do you feel about that? Like, if it seems like an uptight community and you're not an uptight person, probably not a good fit. If it seems like a kind of a dumpy and lax community where people get to do what they want and there's like shoes in the hallway and nobody's really enforcing any of the rules, and you're a really strict person, you're a really rigid and like rule following person, maybe it's not a good culture fit for you. Now, is there an opportunity that you can change the culture there if you're willing to get involved enough? Absolutely. Is there an opportunity for you to get the rules rewritten if you get on the board of directors? Absolutely. Is there an opportunity, if you see that the association is tragically underfunded, that you can get on the board of directors and put together an initiative to have the entire community come together to rewrite the declaration so that the declaration now aligns with their actual budgeting needs and budgeting percentages, and you have the time and desire to do that, and that's fine. But just understand what it is that you're looking at and have a good real estate, just don't use your friend who they've been in a realtor for 7 months and you're just trying to get them their first sale and you're buying a condo. That is a way to get burned really, really badly. Partner with a real estate professional that has a lot of experience with HOAs and condos. Partner with a real estate professional that can guide you and teach you what to look for to tell you if this is a good purchase or not. And if they don't know, if they don't have those resources and you're looking at buying a condo, maybe you need a different real estate professional. Or maybe they have someone who they can refer to. If they're not already telling you to look at the reserve study, if they're not telling you to look at the budget, if they're not telling you to scour the condo docs, then they're really not doing their job for you. They're just trying to make the sale because they get paid commission, right? They get paid by closing the deal. But if they really care about your best interest, they're gonna tell you to look for those things because it's really important. It's really important that your real estate professional be solid and grounded and know what to look for with regards to these financials. They need to be able to advise you whether this is a community you want to live in or not. And if you don't know and they don't know and you really want to work with them, find someone who knows. Find a property management company. I'm sure property manager will review the financials for a couple $100 and they can tell you whether this seems like a well-run association or not. And if you do that, it'll probably save you thousands of dollars in the long run, right? The point is, do your due diligence beforehand. And that doesn't mean doing home inspections. That means really reading the documents. It means really digging into the association's financials. It means looking at the condition of the association. And it means working with professionals who actually know what they're looking at and what they're talking about when it comes to community living, because it's its own world. And the truth of the matter is, it's a world that the vast majority of people involved in both living in those communities, buying in those communities, or realtors working with those communities are tragically undereducated with respect to what they should know to make well-informed and educated and appropriate buying decisions and to guide their clients with respects to those. In conclusion, if you're buying a property that's located in a community of any kind, rewatch this video Do the stuff I talk about. Find someone who knows what they're talking about. Give us a call if you're in Connecticut. I can put you in touch with smart people. If it's locally, I probably know about the community. I know what kind of shape it's in. And if you're a realtor or you're a real estate professional, this might be a really good area for you to niche down in and really get good at HOAs and condos, because all new construction exists in them. And well, the vast majority of new construction exists in those. And in 5-10 years, it's going to be really hard to find a property that doesn't exist in an HOA or condo. So you can make a killing and you can build a tremendous business by focusing on that market and really guiding your clients well, because it's a totally different animal than your traditional housing market. And there's a lot more things that you need to look at with respects to the community and the HOA or the condo association that you're buying into that most people aren't looking at. They're not looking closely enough, and therefore they're getting surprised, and therefore they hate condo associations and they hate HOAs because they didn't read the fine print and they didn't know what they were looking at, and they got burned. And I don't want you to get burned. And if you don't want to get burned, subscribe to this channel, watch this content, sign up for our training course. It's $9 and it'll save you thousands. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. We'll catch you next time. Thanks again. This is Jared with HOA Crusades. We'll talk to you later.